Good morning, children. Today we are going to analyze the poem Childhood. In this poem, the poet Markus Natten wonders when and where he lost his childhood. In his quest to find the moment he grew up, Markus highlights the innocence and faith he lost even as he gained rational individuality. Adolescence, what is being spoken about in this poem, is usually a confusing time for a child who is unable to immediately come to terms with the physical, hormonal, and psychological changes in his or her personality. He no longer feels like a child, but is not quite ready to call himself an adult either. He feels he has lost the innocence and purity of his childhood to some unknown and unforgettable place. Through his poem Childhood, the readers are confronted with the question as to when and where we lost our childhood. The answer leads to self-discovery. The poet feels disappointed because he thinks being a child was better than being an adult. A child's life is peaceful and really sweet, while an adult's character is very complicated. In this poem, there is a repetition of ideas, and that is called a refrain. And here I am going to explain it out in detail. The first line, which is a question, identifies the central theme of the poem. That is, the attempt to identify when exactly the poet lost his childhood. The second line begins with a question word, but ends with an exclamation mark. Hence, it is no more a mere question. Rhetorical in nature, the line brings out the poetic sense of realization. The two lines are, when did my childhood go? Was that the day? Now in the first paragraph, you just have to underline 2-3 words. Number 1, ceased to be 11. Number 2, realized that hell and heaven could not be found in geography. These two are the most important lines because this is what this paragraph is speaking about. The poet is curious to know when he lost his childhood. He tries to find out the answer of his own queries. He is trying to find out when he lost his childhood, when he became mature enough to understand the worldly things. So he keeps saying, when did my childhood go? And he finally realizes that his childhood is gone to some forgotten place that is hidden in an infant's face. In the first stanza, he wonders when did his childhood leave him and where could it be found now. He wonders if it was the day he ceased to be 11, or was it the time that he realized that heaven and hell could not be located on the map he was familiar with. As he matures, he realizes that they do not exist in this world. They are only imaginary places. He feels that perhaps it was that day when he discovered the theories of heaven and hell, and that geography did not provide him any information about the existence of such place. Perhaps it was on that day that he lost his innocence and childhood. Education has made the poet look at the world differently, with more of reason and logic. The poet feels that he had probably lost his childhood when he had acquired a rational thinking towards his surrounding. In the second paragraph, he is speaking about the hypocrisy of adults as he analyzes. So here you have to underline it. The time I realized adults were not all they seemed to be means they were different, double-faced. Why? Because they talked of love, preached of love, but did not act lovingly. So was it that particular day that he lost his childhood? The same question is reiterated, and he wonders when as a child he develops a new perception with which he is able to see through the hypocrisy of the adults. They talk of love and preach of love, but in actuality, in reality, they are double-faced. Was that? Here, the poet is figuring out that adults around him did not practice what they usually preached. They taught others to be loving and caring when they themselves were violent and mean. This is where the child lost his trust and faith in the adults. The poet realizes that probably the loss of faith and trust might have been the major steps towards losing his childhood. This is our second paragraph. In the next paragraph, it is again the same pondering over the same question, wondering if it was the day when he personally acquired certain individuality, when he realized that his mind was his own and he was capable of producing thoughts that were his own, devoid of any form of bias or influence. Now he is conscious of his own separate identity and feels himself different from others. On deeper analysis, we understand that here the poet realized that his mind was unique, for it could form its own opinions and could take its own decisions. He gained a sense of individuality which set him free from the prejudiced opinions of others around him. His own experiences shaped his thoughts now, and he realized that this might have been the time he lost his childhood and innocence completely, when he started using his mind in his own way, when he started understanding about his own individuality, when he stopped being carried away by others. And now when we come to the last paragraph, the poet concludes the poem by expressing his regret at the loss of his childhood, which was a beautiful period of his life. He comes to the conclusion that it has gone to some forgotten place. The recollection of it has faded away with the passage of time. Perhaps it has gone to the innocent face of a child. Here, the poet creates a lovely image of an infant's face. He conveys the idea that the innocence of childhood remains only as long as one is infant. There is a tinge of optimism in this thought. At least, innocence and purity of mind prevails in some form or the other on this earth. In this final stanza, the poet changes his question from wondering at what point in time he had lost his childhood. He now wonders where it went. The last three lines may be interpreted in two ways. The poet claims that his childhood is nothing more than a long lost memory. He recalls his infancy and believes that his true childhood resides there. in that infant's face, and that innocence cannot resurface in this lifetime. The poet believes that his childhood has become nothing more than a memory for him, but has become the reality of some other infant. Innocence is a cynical process where lost from one person Innocence is a cynical process where lost from one person it travels to another, finding residence there. Thus, till date, adults can easily recall and seem to almost relive their own childhood through an infant in their lives.